welcome all of you to participate today in Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle, in which we are taking up a topic that is in a series. And today's topic is, Am I My Emotions? We have previously taken up the topic of, Am I My Body? And the topic of, Am I My Mind? Today we're taking up, Am I my emotions? And then we'll go into, in a couple weeks, who am I really? So we're very fortunate today to have with us someone from a profession that I feel is really has the potential to give us great insight into the world of our emotions. And that's the world of theater. We have with us Donna Blanchard, who was born in Indiana, and she now lives here in Honolulu. She is the managing director of Kumu Kahua Theater, and she's really involved in a lot of different things here in Hawaii, and she's actually the president of the Hawaii State Theater Council. So we have someone who really knows whereof she speaks. She was recommended to us by one of our Still and Living Center students, Karen Hackler, who says that not only is she a theater director, she's a wonderful actress. Karen says, I have witnessed her on Facebook stage and on Zoom play readings, and she's terrific. I personally am looking forward to seeing her most recent production that's on right now. And it's called Who You Again? And it's featured in this week's midweek. And probably Donna will have a chance to tell us a little bit about that. But it's also questioning this idea of identity. So I think it's going to be quite relevant. So the reason that I was thinking of theater as being a really important venue or avenue for us to access this world of our emotions is from my own personal experience. As I have gone through a number of trainings in the NIA technique, which is called a body, mind, spirit technique. Most people think of it as just a movement practice. However, it really does look at us as whole human beings. We get to come at this from all different viewpoints. And in part of my higher trainings and the NIA technique, I was invited to, in the whole group who were going through the training, the trainer would put on a piece of music and give us an emotion and say, move to that emotion, just pour it out. And then click, he'd turn off the piece of music and say, okay, now I'll move to this emotion, click. And we moved to that one. And I had some really profound experiences through that. I hope I have a chance to tell you about one of them, that made me realize that as I went into and then came out of these different emotions, I had a great sense of them having a validity, a reality to them that was surprising when you look at how quickly I was able to jump out of them. So they felt real at the moment, but then zip, they were gone. And so that experience made me really wonder, am I my emotions? They seem so real when I'm going through them, but they disappear so quickly sometimes. So from that standpoint, I thought, let's talk to somebody who really knows about going in and out of different emotions, somebody from the world of theater. And so I want to hand it over to Donna to see what opening comments she'd like to make. And we're going to have a little kind of chat back and forth before we open it up to the whole group.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. My first, when we all start off acting when we're kids, and I was in church pageants and little school plays, you're told things like, okay, play happy. Let it, like sort of like the movement exercise you were talking about, now be sad, now be angry. And we all of us walking around the room were displaying these emotions, and they looked very similar: happy, sad, angry, And this wonderful instructor said, can you be happy and go like this? And can you be angry and go like this? There's so many different levels it really opened my eyes to the different levels of emotions and how we physically manifest them and how we fight them. So one of my favorite things that we have to tell actors all the time is, okay, you're playing a character who's drunk, but drunk people don't try to act drunk, they try to act sober. And if you're playing a character who is crying, they're upset about something, we humans try not to cry. It's a very particular circumstance in which we will just let ourselves ugly cry. For the most part, we don't do that. We fight our own emotions. And it really is kind of, when you look at it that way, to me, it's kind of a slurry of where our emotions, what we're feeling at any given time, and how we can affect the way that we're feeling. And part of the reason when Renee asked me about doing this, I found a couple of articles on cognitive dissonance, because I, at one point in my career, was doing a voiceover. So I was in a recording studio, and they wanted a female giggle. So I giggled, and they said, oh, no, a little higher. Oh, okay, now do it again, but do it this way and do it this way. So I was working hard at giggling for a long time, at least 15 minutes. And by the time they got the take that they needed, I couldn't stop giggling. And I fought terrible traffic getting there. I was running late, which I just beat myself up about that so badly. There was a lot of negativity going into this, but by the time I walked out, I was happy just from actually doing the giggle. So I one time saw Tony Robbins. Basically, you guys are all familiar with Tony Robbins and neuro-linguistic programming, and he sort of performed mass hypnosis on us based on this theory that if you get up and shout and cheer, you're going to raise your energy as well as raising your body physically. So my perspective as an actor is also my perspective as someone who's been in therapy for quite a while, that we can tell ourselves, we can intellectualize all over the place, but until we figure out what the physical manifestation is of that, where we want to be, or until we connect with the physical manifestation of where we actually are, then we're not really connected. And because of that, one of my favorite things to do when I wake up in the morning is to say, wouldn't it be great if I was in a fantastic mood all day? Wouldn't it be great if this was the best day ever? And then get out of bed as though that is the truth, that is happening. And it will affect the trajectory of your day. Now, the question of, are we our emotions, is a really interesting one, I feel, because a lot of times people are not in touch with their real emotions. I was raised in the 60s and 70s in a small town with a fundamentalist Christian family. I was not taught to be in touch with my emotions. I was only taught to be in touch with the happy, good, presentable, positive ones. All of the other emotions we were taught by example, and sometimes literally taught to, no, ladies don't do that. So this may be part of the reason why I've been in therapy as long as I have, is just trying to get in touch with how do I feel? And then to face my emotions are not always right. It's not always the leg I want to stand on. If I'm upset about something, I still get to intellectually decide, no, this is a really great thing. And yes, I feel that emotion, but that's not necessarily the truth. That's a reaction that I am having to something, but it's not where I necessarily need to go. And I like to think, I'll stop talking in just a moment. I like to think that that I'm smarter than someone who could be fooled by acting a buffoon and giggling for 15 minutes. But the fact is, I'm just not. I can lie to myself and say, no, I'm going to giggle for a while. I'm going to jump around. And that is going to make me feel better. I'll take that. And as actors, we just have to figure out what is that physical manifestation. That's what we're going to go with. And our bodies will react with us. I think that one of the another very important thing that I learned in the world of acting is then you have to make the decision to step out of it and decide that if this is my character, I'm really oversimplified. This is my character, but this is Donna. I need to make sure that I come back to Donna where I want to be. And I think one of the things that we gain as actors is a lot of insight in, I wasn't taught how to express anger. I just wasn't. But I played Martha in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. I got to express some anger. I learned from that character how to express anger and how I wanted to portray it and then physically embody that. It's been a really wonderful learning lesson for me, but actually it can be a very dangerous place for actors to be if they don't recognize how much what you are physically doing will affect, your heart and your soul.
Well, that's a great start. One of the other things that showed up in today's midweek is something from the Science Advice Goddess. She is largely counseling people who have dating questions. And she had this quote to somebody who tends to be very shy, and I was asking her about that. And she writes back to here, your feelings are not the boss of you. Just because you have a feeling doesn't mean you have to go all, yes, your kingship in response. And now she might go a little too far with this one, but she says, we tend not to unpack our fears. Ask ourselves, yo, self, what's the worst thing that could happen if I go and say hi to hot stranger dude over there? Unless you can truthfully answer, I'll be snatched up and pecked to death by a pterodactyl, there's really no good reason not to take the plunge and go talk to him. So just that idea that we don't have to be held hostage by our emotions is what I heard coming through that. And do you feel as if your experience through theater and all of the different people that you've acted with and you've directed has shown that there is a little bit of less of getting held hostage by emotions? Or can there be?
There can be. I mean, there's a lot of romances that come from the stage with two actors playing love interests. It's really, it happens often that they end up getting together, and those romances also don't normally last that long because, you know, the feeling will eventually leave you when you're not on the stage playing those roles in which you're loving and taking care of each other and hearing and seeing, you know, what we all want. We want to be truly seen. I think that there's a trajectory of growth for an actor that begins with, I want to get on stage and do these crazy things. I want to be able to be that person. And as we continue with our career and hopefully get educated, because if you're doing a show that runs for a year on a Tuesday night, you may not feel love for that person. You have to have the acting chops to still manifest that on stage so that the audience believes that that's what you're going through. So with maturity and education, then we learn how to harness that a little bit more. I have seen people get lost in a character. I have seen people who believe that they need to live the life of a character in order to eventually portray it and get to know them. And I don't believe that. I act from a cerebral place first. I make decisions about my character, and then I make decisions about the physical manifestation of that. And then I step into it. And still, you have to remember to step out. Now, I think that it really does, and you don't have to be an actor and get an education in acting or even get on stage to use this. But do you guys remember the movie Fame? I'm thinking of the original one with Irene Cara. It's a wonderful movie. Very early on in their first acting class, they're told to pay attention to themselves throughout the week, every little, how they hold a spoon to eat their cereal in the morning, and how they sit when they're watching television, and all of these things. And we would all benefit from that, from just paying attention to not only how we are holding ourselves, but how other people do that as well. And people who are a little more empathic or aware are always looking at other people to see how they're reacting, so we know how to touch them. Am I touching you yet? You're not. I don't see you buying in, so how am I going to change my tack in order to get there? That's something that we may do very unconsciously, but if we start doing those things consciously, it helps us to not only see ourselves a lot better, but to really see the people that we're interacting with as well.
Yeah. And what is it like for you to go between different characters? I think you've been in parts or in productions where you played multiple characters, right?
Yeah. I'm always shocked when I'm on stage at how time seems to slow down within the characters, so that there is space for all of the little subtleties of the human condition. It is like a form of meditation. It's such deep concentration that we're carrying out into the world. And I have played multiple characters before within the same production, and it's always rooted in the spine for me to make those. I'm making my decisions that this is one character's posture, and another is here, and another is, I make those decisions about where they're their spine is situated and how they're planted on the ground or not through their feet. And that I've rehearsed, I've added all of the texture that goes into a character, and I can snap back and forth between them by just a little spinal adjustment. And you know what, I did it unconsciously initially. It took me a while to figure out, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm just changing my posture subtly, and that's telling me, now I have muscle memory that tells me everything else I need to know about how this character moves in the world. So we can do that for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure, I don't know even where I heard about it, but the exercise where you imagine yourself in a standing over here to the side of you, and you imagine that you feel great, or you just aced the test, or whatever, feeling that you want to project, and then you step into that imagined space, and you'll feel it. It really does work. So yeah, I guess I keep coming back to the emotions are so rooted in the body. I don't know which is the alpha and the omega there.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the things that comes to mind, a lot of different philosophical traditions kind of parse things away and come down to what's real, or what's more real, and what's less real. And something that is enduring tends to take on that quality of more real, whereas something that's very evanescent and changing is generally taken to be something having less reality. And so if we are, and we are this year, looking at this idea of being truly human, if these emotions are something that are not only fleeting, but there's something that we can invent. Like we can invent happy self over here standing beside me. I get up and get over there, and all of a sudden I'm happy self. How real is that? Versus this deeper sense of myself that, for one thing, might be able to do that creation. And that deeper sense of myself that is able to observe all of those different characters, all of those different emotions that I see myself going through. Does that maybe have a greater sense of reality? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask Donna that, and then I think we'll open it up for everybody's conversation. So please, Donna.
That's great. Yeah, if we go from the feeling, I really love that imagery, Renee. If we go from the feeling of all of these disparate qualities and things that happen to us, and we bring ourselves back to, we are the stationary point, and all of this is orbiting us, and we can pick and choose what we're going to pull down and work with. And I think that's a very healthy place to be, as long as we don't ignore.
Right.
Sometimes you have to take time to sit and be sad. That's been a really big life lesson for me, that it's so unhealthy if you don't do that. And it's really beautiful when you do give yourself that grace, and so immediate. Eckhart Tolle talks about we're often very not present in our lives, and something will happen that surprises you, and it brings you into the present moment like nothing else. I one time was driving on the continent, and a raccoon ran in front of my car, and of course I was immediately present with that raccoon. But I realized that I had just been driving for half an hour, and I didn't remember any of the drive because I was all in my head. I wasn't even, I had, if you asked me how I was feeling at that moment, I couldn't have told you until life gave me that raccoon.
Yeah. Well, maybe just before I completely open it up to everybody, I'll go ahead and tell my little story that I was alluding to at first. And so that I don't mean to say that there's no reality to these emotions at all, or that we shouldn't be experiencing them, because that would be to be blotting out so much of the human experience. And these emotions are probably something that allows us to have tremendous rapport with others. According to the depth in which we can actually really feel these emotions, we will be able to recognize and empathize compassionately with others, and we can adjust our course, our words accordingly and more appropriately. So I so agree with you that it is really important for us to be able to experience those. So here's the little story I want to tell. I don't pull it out very often. My mom's here from Oakland. I don't even think she's ever heard this story, maybe. We'll see. But so here I am in one of these NIA trainings, and we're going through these different emotions. And our trainer says, okay, I want you to dance evil. Well, I heard that word and I just immediately put up all this resistance, and I'm going, well, even evil isn't even an emotion. And besides that, I'm not an evil person. So there's no way I can do that. And oh boy, you can see I got problems right there. So, but then I remembered, okay, at the beginning of the training, I promised with everybody else that I would do my best. So, okay, I'm going to do my best dancing evil. So this music comes on, and I have to say it's kind of creepy. Well, I begin to feel myself and sense my body kind of shriveling and shrinking up. And let's talk about spine. I've got all this spinal contortion going on. And pretty soon I'm on the floor and I'm kind of writhing around on the floor. And I can feel all these muscles contracting. And pretty soon I actually get the sense of my eating myself up all the way down. I completely swallow myself up. And then I start looking around and I see there are other people out there, and I start going after them. And he turns off the music. And then he says, okay, let's everybody be flirtatious. Oh, okay, let's be flirtatious. Well, that was such a trip for me to go through that experience. I mean, talk about, yeah, I'm not evil. I have no idea what that is. I mean, I was ready to become a zombie cannibal or something. So that's one. But then two, to be able to flip into, oh, let's be flirtatious. It just gave me an enormous sense of, one, being able to relate to something I thought that I had no ability to relate to at all. And two, to have a lot more courage to be able to go deep into this kind of emotional state and know that I could come back out of it. And so it has made me, I feel like it's given me a much broader range of emotional elasticity and depth. than I had prior to that time. I feel like I'm able to participate so much more fully in the human experience as a result of feeling that I can touch into these emotions, come back out, and I'm intact. I haven't fallen into it, totally succumbed. And so that that gives me that greater sense of self and self-awareness from which to be able to connect with other human beings. So that's a little story I wanted to share. And now I'd just really love to open it up to everybody and your experiences and this question of, am I my emotions? Love to hear from each of you. And of course, Donna will have so much more to inform us with. Kevin.
Well, Donna, I loved your presentation, and I especially like when you put, I loved the story about the giggle and how, it just progressed over the course. But of course, I just want to bring up one point and just get your opinion on it. Somebody like the tragic end of Heath Ledger, who was really immersed in that character that was so dark and kind of different from some of the other characters that he played prior to that role. I just am curious if you think some of these A-lister Hollywood stars sometimes get so engulfed in the role, or if you think maybe there are things occurring beyond that. Like, I know that he had suffered with depression and other things in the past. Do you think that role maybe hindered him from, kind of getting over his internal struggle and then combining that with the struggle of accurately portraying that role on the film?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this ties really nicely to the story that Renee just told us, that one of the myths of acting is that you are putting something on, you're adopting an emotion or something, when really you're peeling back your own layers and you're finding it within you, like Renee did. She found that little evil princess inside of her. So I have had played a role long enough that was a person who was not dealing very well with life, and it really caused me to do a lot of introspection, because in order to play that role well, I had to admit that that is a part of me that I carry around, and then I had to get in touch with it night after night. I don't know about Heath Ledger so much, but it's possible that he got in touch with something that was there. And I really think that a lot of our celebrities, they live in bubbles we don't understand. There's so much enabling that goes into those lives. And it's really just, if you've known someone who got famous, it's like they're not a real person anymore because they're just not living in a real world. So I would imagine that probably had something to do with it as well, and substance abuse. But it's very possible that he just opened something up. Anybody who's worked with a good therapist, you always reach a point where you crack open a little bit. And now you have to deal with whatever you haven't admitted to or dealt with before. So the stage can be a really dangerous place.
Right. I asked that too, because I know you had mentioned the therapy portion. A lot of times, like, I have had experience with eye movement desensitization reprocessing for trauma. And I just feel that, like you said, we often think that somebody puts a feeling with an emotion. And for example, if there's a triggering effect, like let's say, this wasn't my case, but let's say you were a witness to a gunshot, and maybe someday you're walking and there was a backfire of a car, that kind of has that re-triggering of the trauma. But in the end, I feel that through that type of therapy, at least, your emotions are pretty much realigned and said, okay, the car sound did trigger your memory to feel that emotion of afraid, frightened, on the defense. But then what was the end result? The car kept going. It wasn't a gunshot. So I think with time, you're absolutely right. The emotions are not always locked to that specific action. You can train your brain. I think that's a really phenomenal piece of it.
I'm just starting EMDR therapy.
Oh,
I'm excited that you mentioned that. Yeah, I think that you have to have help in processing that. You can't have people around you that are saying, oh yeah, that's great, you were so upset. And I always fear for actors when they go through a tough scene on stage and they come back for the curtain call for the applause and they're still crying. That's a big red flag for me to see in an actor. You have to be able to separate those two and take that mask off.
Yeah, thank you so much. And for those of you who were here when we were talking with Alice Boyd from the Feldenkrais somatic tradition, we were talking a lot about this idea of neuroplasticity and how it is that we can retrain the brain and do so deliberately. So it's interesting that we're hearing it now again within the concept of are we our emotions, when we were looking at it in regard to am I my mind? Yeah. So let's call on Robert Moore, and then we have Carol Ann.
Oh, yes. One of the things about emotions, not in theater, is they are as real as long as they last. So I remember one time I was through a long period of anger, and I got very sick because I was angry. And it was very difficult to get out of this until I realized how I was making myself sick. And then I haven't been enamored by anger since that time. It didn't seem like it was worth the, like you're ruining yourself. But that's the curious thing about it. The Dalai Lama is always talking about trying to deal with negative emotions, destructive emotions, and learning how to control those and cultivate positive ones. So in terms of feeling these things that we do, that like anger or like you're really depressed because you got a reason to be depressed, to move those in positive directions. Do you think theater helps that?
I think as long it can, as long as you have the right support and or knowledge going into it. Yeah, a friend of mine used to teach at the, she's a life member of the Actors Studio in New York and used to teach in their school there. And we brought her to a theater where I was working, and someone in the audience said, can theater be therapeutic? And she got very upset about it and said, no, this is not. You pay a therapist to get therapy. You don't go on the stage to get your therapy. It can be therapeutic. It does have side effects for us that can be very, very good, but it can also be abused, and I understand why she got, I initially, when the question was asked, was thinking, oh yeah, it absolutely can be therapeutic, but there's so much danger in there if you aren't handling it right. I mean, sometimes we play characters who do and say despicable things. We don't want to get too wrapped up in that, but we can say, we can relish it while we're doing it without getting too far gone with it. But yeah, it's anytime you're going through the motions physically, you're going to carry a little bit of that with you. It's important to just be very conscious of it.
Carol Ann.
I love this topic so much for a lot of reasons. Primarily because my therapist and I are working on this concept of internal dialogue and this theory that we have an internal family that speaks to us. And we can cultivate on those people and tease them out and grow them, per se, and grow their personalities. And
she's kind of said it in the same way you've said about acting, that it can be reflective of a historical thing that you're seeing in your head, that you evoke it from a historical something that's happened to you that you can pull out of your memories. And I just want to understand that with acting, so in psychiatry, emotions without feeling them, physically feeling them, is a primary component of psychiatric disassociation. And most traumas have, in where you get to that extreme of disassociating an emotion from a feeling or actually feeling it, trauma triggers typically cause people to have catecholamine responses, endorphin responses, actual physiological manifestations of what is happening in somebody's head. And as an actor, are you shutting off that physiological response and disassociating your emotion from your feeling? Or how does that happen for an actor?
Well, we have to, that's interesting. We have to also think about the audience and what the audience is seeing. Like if I'm supposed to be whispering something to someone next to me, it still has to be loud enough that it's heard in the back row. So same with the emotions that we're playing, we have to be able to play large enough in theater. In film, you can play things really small and the camera is doing a lot of that work for you. But it does happen that, you know, you're on stage in the middle of a scene and you're playing with great gusto and someone's cell phone rings in the audience. And you have a visceral reaction to that. And you know, you're like split in two at that moment, and you have to ignore what all of the emotion that you have going into. Why didn't they turn their darn cell phone on to do not disturb while they're in here? You do have to ignore that, and hopefully, you know, it's the same when I was in the restaurant business. You do the job on a Saturday night when you're busy and you keep the tables turning, and then afterwards you have some decompression time with everyone where you can talk about, can you believe that lady in the purple dress? You know, you have to be able to release it at some point. But I mean, it happens all the time on stage that we have to, you're manufacturing something, and sometimes you have to disassociate from something else that's going on. Like maybe you don't like the person you're playing opposite, but you know, that happens.
Sorry, I have my mic still open. I didn't realize.
And yet when that happens, Donna, effectively, and you're able to quell that emotion of wanting to strangle the person with the cell phone, or just really not feeling into giving a kiss to the person that you're supposed to give a kiss to, it's that observer, that witness within yourself, right? That is still there. So that witness is able to pick up, yeah, don't want to kiss them. And then also, it's my job to kiss them. I'm on stage. I'm playing this role. Audience needs it. Okay. Mwah. Okay. Did it. Right. Which is really different than the problem that I think Carol Ann was referring to, where someone has lost any sense of objectivity in that way. They are experiencing emotions or seeing things, and there's no physiological cue that would cause that to happen. There's no manifestation in the world that's bringing on sensations, but they are so lost, they don't have that objectivity anymore.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The chorus in your mind. I'd love to talk more about that. I feel like in that moment on stage where you have to make a decision now, or you're not going to address the cell phone, you're going to shut that down. There's a solitary voice in your head saying, this is the direction we're going in, go. But I noticed I was playing solitaire the other day, and I could hear these different voices in my head saying, why didn't you see that earlier? Look at that, move that over there. In those quiet times, we can really hear that. So what did you say that they are all of those voices are potential teachers? Is that how you put it?
We have these internal families. So, you have the good devil here, the angel over here. You have your conscience, you have your thing that provides you some kind of ethos or morality. And that if you look at these internal dialogues that you have with yourself, like I have a little old lady that lives in my head and not in a, and I told her, you're not going to chase me with a straitjacket, right? And she's like, no, like people have these internal dialogues. Like it's maybe why some actors, when they play a little old lady, that they're really good at it, even though they're a 50-year-old man, and it's delving into these internal characters and using them as a way of massaging and kind of regulating yourself a little bit, and choosing that ability to have a persona that you put forward. Okay, today I'm going to be the boss. I'm going to have these emotions, like you said, waking up with that certain introspective intention that you set your tone for your day. That dialogues come from somewhere within. You're not just waking up and having this outward spoken dialogue with yourself. You've had it in your head, and then you put it to language, and you give it power, and you give it meaning. And it's these places of this internal family system that people have that exists in them. Is that if you dig into it and you lean into the fact that it's not a crazy philosophy or theology or anything else, it's a way of giving yourself that permission to have those individual personas to put forward and conquer your day with, more than anything. And some days I don't feel like being the boss lady. I want to put my sweats on. I want to chill out to Netflix. I want to binge watch, Emily in Paris or whatever else it may be for that day, and but it's about giving yourself the permission to have that other persona, and it just be as much a part of yourself as the person that's speaking out of your mouth.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I love this conversation. Thank you so much. It's really, really important, because what we're referring to is to be aware of our beliefs and our thoughts. And in cognitive therapy, what they talk about is there's an activating event or something happens, and there's a belief, and then there's a consequence. And the consequence may be an emotion, it may be a reaction, and it can be automatic. We don't realize that all of a sudden this thing happened, and there's an instantaneous belief, and then we react in a certain way. One of my clients, she was in the mall, and all of a sudden she burst out crying, and she realized she had smelled the tobacco of her husband that died, and she just lost it. And this was 5 years after he passed. And so I think if we can be aware of the committee inside of us or what our thoughts are, we can make a choice And it's a split second choice between reacting and responding. And I think that is a really, it's taking that breath when something happens, and then making a choice. Am I automatically reacting, or do I want to make a choice of how I respond? Another client of mine, her husband, she made this beautiful dinner, and he forgot to come down. He was busy working. It was for their anniversary. And I was so impressed with her. She says, I didn't get mad. I figured he was very busy. I would have been pissed. I make this delicious dinner with candles and everything, but she made the conscious decision to say, he's just very busy. I'll go up and remind him. And it's like, what is our choice? Can we surrender and really be guided and listen to what our internal dialogue is, so that we can respond instead of always react? And many times we can't. Many times with PTSD or other things, it's like it becomes an automatic response and we don't know where it comes from, but there's some activating event. The visual for that is like there's a flame and there's a wick and then there's a piece of dynamite, and once you light the wick, can we cut the belief or the thought so it doesn't explode? Or do we really make a choice of how we want to, what our emotion is? Sometimes we don't have that awareness, but I think that's really being more aware of ourselves and what we're thinking, and then really taking that breath and making a choice of how do I want to respond, or what's the purpose of my response. So I think that's a really important point to really look at. What are our beliefs? It's like not choosing to respond to the telephone and saying, I am going to just be present right here now, and then I can respond to that later. So I think that's a really important part of my emotions, because I think we do have a choice, but we don't feel like we do. We forget that it's the thinking part of it that makes our emotions.
Yeah, I had one time I heard, I don't know, I was in the grocery store and the Joni Mitchell's song, Both Sides Now, and one of her later recordings of it, and I got really sad. And then I remembered that was the song that's playing in the movie Love Actually, when Emma Thompson realizes that her husband is probably cheating on her. And I just felt it so much from that song. And it still makes me sad to think about. Emma Thompson did a really great job with that moment in the film too. But to your point, Diana, I also feel like I have wondered when I first started reading Eckhart Tolle. So if we recognize that we are the observer, is it actually going to take the joy out of joy if we observe ourselves having joy? I know I can get a little lost in these esoteric questions sometimes, but it actually, I feel
awareness. Like if we're aware that we're joyful and we're feeling it, it's like Renee when you started laughing, and you were chuckling. It's like making a conscious choice, and how joyful that we can say, I'm grateful, or I feel the joy. To be aware of what we're feeling. And like you said, many people don't have the slightest idea of what they're feeling. There's no awareness of what they're feeling because they've been taught they're not supposed to feel anger, or they can feel sad, or vice versa. And we're taught how to behave when we're kids. And it takes a lot of work to retrain ourselves to allow ourselves to feel. And it's scary because it's not safe. It wasn't safe perhaps as a child.
What a wonderful group of people you have here, Renee.
Oh, I know. Well, just from my personal, very recent experience of being out on the water with our 4-year-old grandson last weekend, and we were getting pulled behind the boat on this big raft thing, and we're holding on, and he just kept looking over to me and saying, oh, Nene, I'm having so much fun. I'm having so much fun. There was no lack of joy in his realization of having it. I think it enhanced it. Well, let's see. I see my mom had her hand up, and I know David's right on the brink of some amazing question or statement. So I'm going to call on Mom first. This is Nancy Ocker. She's in Oakland, California.
Well, I just wanted to go back to talking about children rather than adults. because all of this leads back into childhood. And in California schools, in the last, I don't know how many years, they teach in elementary that kids have 12 emotions, and they try to have, they have somebody come out from the central office every week to lead these, and I think that's great. But if we always let people act on their emotions when they're little like that, what about a child that, you know, any child probably hates their mother or hates their father at any particular point from the age 5 up or something. Is it okay to let that child stand there and rage at you and how much they hate you and maybe hit you and so on? Because they're expressing their emotions. You know, I think parenting really gets into this topic very much, and it'd be interesting, you know, to take it from that aspect.
Well, can we talk about Will Smith? Because I mean, he didn't deal with his anger very well, and we all. It drives me crazy when I'm looking at, you know, people on Twitter saying he was. He had every right. He was in the right. He was so angry about it, and we as adults should know better that you have to find a better outlet. I wish he would have walked up on stage and said, "You really." That was a bad joke. You said something that hurt my wife. Please apologize to her. We would all be so excited about him if he had done that. I don't know. I haven't, kids intimidate me. So I don't know so much about where to draw, and I don't have any of my own. I don't know about where to draw the line with them, but I think it's important to help them recognize what you're feeling right now is anger. But you got to do something else.
I think that's what California curriculum is about, is to have them recognize that feeling and what are the alternatives you have rather than striking out and so on.
That's wonderful.
But I've seen some parents who don't follow that, you know, and it's been very upsetting when a parent will allow a child to hit them and scream at them and so on. So anyway, that was just a point I wanted to make.
I want to call on Mary. Mary's had a lot of generations of child rearing her own, and people who have been adopted Hanayed into her family. And I wonder what perspective you might have on this, Mary.
Thank you, Renee. And thank you, Donna. Thinking about what we've been talking about, discipline comes into my head because we have to be accountable for our actions. And I also read something this morning about the Will Smith's biography, how he watched his mother being hit by his father, and that the incident with Chris Rock wasn't necessarily against Jada, but it reminded him of the abuse that he was not able to stop from his father, and he reacted. But I love the way that Donna says, yes, if he had gotten up there and just been a gentleman about it, that would have changed the whole evening for the whole world, you know, everybody that was watching in the audience and on screen in their homes. And then talking or answering the comment about children. And you have to acknowledge a child's feelings. I was raised in a family that says, you know, we were the spare the rod and spoil the child. Well, that we weren't spared the rod, but we weren't abused. I don't consider what happened. It was discipline. I consider it discipline and not abuse. But I also understand that we have to be taught. A child doesn't know what he's doing is right or wrong, except from the feedback that we give them. I do not tolerate any kind of violence in my house. I do step in if I feel that one person or another is out of line. And I think I can do that because I'm old and it's my house. And if you don't like it, you can choose something else. But in my house, I mean, I sound like a father we've always heard, you know, this is my house, you're going to do it my way. And for the most part, I allow that, except when it comes to violence and disrespect. So no violence against anybody of any age or sex or position, and you must respect each other. I know that some people feel that respect is earned, and there is an aspect to that, but I believe that we are all made for respect. We all deserve respect, and we can lose it and we can gain it back. Amen.
Thank you so much, Mary. Well, I want to give Donna, I know we've gone past the top of the hour, a brief chance to respond back to anything you'd like to on this question of am I my emotions? And then wanted to ask if there's anybody who would like to give a vote of thanks to Donna for today.
Thank you. I really, you know, when you called last week, I did not know what to expect, but I was open to it. I'm trying to say yes whenever possible, just because I have been working from home for the last couple of years, and life can get a little insular doing that. So I'm really grateful to be included in this conversation. And I guess my takeaway is that there's just no end to what we can find within us. And it's not that it's wasted if we just keep it within us, but it's so much more rich when we share with other people, share our humanity. I think that's the beauty of theater. I feel like my humanity is magnified so much more when I can share it with other people, and art is the way that we do that. Thank you for being so supportive and open to the conversation. I really appreciate it.